a microphone right there. I'll just ask that you pull it close to you and speak loudly and clearly. Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Could you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
My name is Elisa Smaltz.
Can you spell your last name again?
Smaltz.
Are you currently employed?
I am a part-time contractor for the city of Peoria.
Okay, what are you doing for them?
They needed assistance with verifications of their technical casework and latent prints, so that's what I do.
Prior to that, were you employed by the city of Scottsdale Crime Laboratory?
Yes, I was.
And when did you go to work there?
I started there in 2006 and worked there until the last day of last year when I retired.
All righty. Can you give us a little synopsis of, well, first of all, let me ask you this. Over the course of your career at the Scottsdale Crime Laboratory, tell us a little bit about what you did, starting from the beginning up until your retirement.
Well, I was first hired as a latent print examiner in their latent print unit. The latent print unit soon thereafter was put in with the crime laboratory, so our titles changed to forensic scientists. And I worked my way up through the ranks, becoming a forensic scientist supervisor, and then after that being promoted to the forensic laboratory manager.
Okay. And as the manager, what did you do?
I oversaw all the disciplines in the Scottsdale laboratory.
And when did you become the manager?
In 2018.
Tell us about your education, training that allowed you to do the jobs that you have done.
I started working as a crime lab analyst for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in 1992. I worked there until I went to Scottsdale in 2006. While I was at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, I processed crime scenes. I did latent print comparisons. I processed evidence from those crime scenes in the laboratory. I did APHIS entries and comparisons, and back then we developed our own film.
Okay. Things have changed.
Yes, much so. And then after that, like I said, I went to the Scottsdale laboratory, and I did latent print comparisons. At the Scottsdale laboratory, the latent print examiners do not respond to the scene unless they need specialized assistance. So my primary function at the laboratory as a latent print examiner was we processed evidence in the laboratory and we compared those prints to known subjects.
You, before I forget about it, you mentioned a term, APHIS.
Yes.
AFIS, I believe.
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what that is?
It's a database. APHIS stands for Automated Fingerprint Identification System, and it's a database that houses many known exemplars from people who either have been arrested, who are trying to obtain a license for various reasons, whether it be like real estate license, teachers, that sort of thing, and then also applicants for government work. They're all housed in that database. And what that does is if there is a latent print out at the scene or that we develop in the laboratory and we do not have a subject, or the subject that they gave us when we compared it to them. If we determine it wasn't that person, we can still try to identify it by placing it into that system to search against all those known exemplars in the database.
You mentioned a moment ago that ordinarily, unless requested, latent print examiners, at least at the Scottsdale Crime Laboratory, would not respond to a crime scene, correct?
That's correct.
So was was much of your work as a latent print examiner done actually in the laboratory itself?
Yes.
I need to get some of that water that is up here. Thank you. I don't know if this applies to everyone here, but I would think that at least it's possible that when someone mentions the term latent print, they're thinking of fingerprints, which would be the case. But also sometimes do we leave prints on surfaces from other parts of our body?
Yes, there's friction ridge skin is what makes up a fingerprint or a friction ridge print. You have them on your hands and on the bottom of your feet.
And is it just the tips of the fingers or other areas of the hand?
No, it's the entire hand, your surface here. Fingers, the fingertips, the length of your fingers, and the palm.
Thank you. And so if I walk across a surface barefoot, I might leave ridge detail.
That's correct.
And I think I had Ms. Metz explain friction ridge detail yesterday, but let me go ahead and ask you to do the same.
Friction ridge skin, everyone has it. If you look at your hands, you have like ridges and furrows. Biologically, it's there so to assist someone in gripping, and there have different breaks and minutia in there that identifies that print to you uniquely.
Assume for me that we've had a description of the process of on occasion lifting a latent print that has been found on an item. That lift is taken to the crime laboratory where you worked, and you were asked to compare that lift to known print impressions, okay?
Yes.
So you mentioned that, for example, someone might apply to become a teacher or other government position, and in order to get licensed, they have to submit prints, and those prints, images of those prints at least, are put into the APHIS system, correct?
That's correct.
Maybe someone on the jury has never been fingerprinted, but let me have you describe, for example, if I had to come to the crime laboratory because I wanted to become a teacher, I was required to have my known prints taken. How would that happen? How would you accomplish that task?
You would go to a designated location in which they offer that service. For instance, for a license, as you described, most likely you would be printed using black printer's ink and a paper stock card that has a place for all 10 fingers rolled and placed directly straight onto the card. But if you were, for instance, being arrested, most likely it's now live scan. It's done digitally. It's a piece of glass on a station in which they roll those prints and they go directly into the database.
Digitally.
Digitally, yes.
Okay. When you're in the laboratory and you're asked to do a comparison between a latent from a scene, latent lift from a scene, to known prints, how do you go about doing that?
The first thing I do is I check to see if they have any fingerprint record on file. If they do, most likely I can retrieve those digitally. Sometimes agencies have files that are the way that I described before, using black printer's ink. So I would do my best to try to locate a known fingerprint record for that person.
And then how do you go about determining if those match or not?
I first, with the latent print, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it to see what kind of detail is there. Is there even enough there for me to conduct a comparison? The next thing I'm going to look at is to see anything like if there's distortion in that print so that I can take that into account when I'm doing the comparison. So I analyze that print and I notate, mentally the uniqueness of that print. And then I take the 10 print record that I have on the subject that is to be compared, and I start looking for the target group that I've memorized in my head. Like, I look at the print, I pick out a certain area of the latent print with the detail, and I'm trying to locate that in the 10 print card or the palm, depending on if it's a 10 print or a palm. And if I see an area in the exemplars that looks similar, then I go and take a deeper dive look into that print, and I start comparing the minutia to see if they're in the same relative position in the same area of that print until I'm satisfied that either it is that person or if that person can be excluded.
Now, you told me, if I understood you correctly, that on occasion you might be called to crime scenes, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, when you were with the sheriff's office, that's what you did, right?
Yes.
So imagine you're at a crime scene and you're looking at an item, a tabletop, for example, and you are your task is to see if there are any fingerprints, palm prints, footprints, whatever on that surface. Is the only way that you can preserve what you find by that latent lift process, or do sometimes you photograph the
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so when I'm going to process an area, the first thing I determine is what is the surface I'm processing? What kind of surface is it? Is it porous? Is it non-porous? Is it textured? Is it wood? Is it glass? That sort of thing. And then that will allow me to determine which process is best to use on that surface. So there's physical processes such as the black powder method lifting, and then there's chemical processes as well. So, for instance, if there's a surface that's more textured, or a print may be in something other than like normal sweat or perspiration, then I'll pick a chemical process, which there's various ones. There's some that's specifically for blood, and there's some that all I'm trying to do is preserve any print that may be on that surface. And for instance, super glue method, it's cyanacrylate, and what happens in that process is that area is, the super glue is fumed. Those fumes are allowed to deposit on the surface, which then hardens those prints and preserves those prints. And then subsequent chemical process like liquid chemicals can then be applied without washing them away. And then those will be looked at like under a forensic light source to be able to visualize, and then you would photograph those.
Would it be possible for you to preserve a latent print that you find at a scene, get it back to the laboratory, and in looking at it, then determine there really isn't, it's a print, but there isn't sufficient ridge detail to do any sort of comparison?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because typically when you're at the scene, you're just trying to collect as much as you can. It's really not the time for you to do any specific analysis on those prints.
Okay. All right, I want to take you back to February of 2015. On February the 19th of 2015, what was your assignment in the laboratory?
I was a forensic scientist supervisor at that time.
And I neglected to ask, when you do your work, either going to a scene, processing an item within the laboratory, what sort of records do you keep of your work?
Anytime a request is submitted and I do any type of examination, then I author an examination report. And during that examination, I also take notes. So the documentation would be my notes plus the report.
And when you, for example, if you responded to a scene and you collected latent prints that could potentially be compared, are those what you lifted or collected from the scene, are those maintained in the crime laboratory? And what I'm getting at here is, for example, a latent print card, which Ms. Metz explained yesterday. Are those preserved within the laboratory?
Yes.
If you take a photograph of, you develop a latent at the scene and you take a photograph of it, are those preserved in the laboratory?
Yes.
I want to take you to February the 19th, 2015. Did you respond to a scene at 8526 East Monterey Way within the city of Scottsdale?
Yes.
Now, why did you go to this scene?
I was requested to respond to the scene to see if there was any assistance I could provide regarding footwear and friction ridge detail that perhaps could use additional processes that the crime scene specialists could not do.
Now, I'm going to ask you, ma'am, this morning to go through a number of reports that I believe you authored. And for your assistance, Exhibit 33, which is a large binder, is there. If you need the opportunity to review one of your reports to refresh your recollection about what you did, let us know, and that can take place. But before I do that, so do you remember going to this scene?
Yes.
And when you arrived, tell us what you did. I mean, initially, what you did.
The first thing I did was spoke to detective there to see where I could enter the residence. Once I was able to enter the residence, they showed me around to see the things they had in mind for me, and I offered my opinion on how I could help them.
Okay.
And so after that, after I obtained that information, then I was able to determine what supplies I would need.
And when you enter when you entered into this scene, are you wearing any protective clothing of any sort?
Yes.
And what would that be?
We wear something called Tyvek suits. It's a special suit. They're usually white. And so I would have the booties, a full suit, a bonnet on to cover my head, my hair, and a mask.
Okay. What about,
and gloves.
And gloves. All righty.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's been 10 years ago or so, actually a little longer than that now, maybe, but what do you remember, if anything, about what you saw or smelled when you entered the residence?
I entered the residence through the side, which entered like a little, I don't know if it was a pantry area or a storage area that then led into the kitchen. So that's the route I entered. I did not enter through the front door. The first thing that caught my eye was the amount of blood that was on the kitchen floor, and a like white, appeared to be liquid at some point, residue on the floor in the living room, and a strong odor of, the only way I could describe it is like bleach or chlorine or something like that.
Okay. The So you mentioned a moment ago that you spoke with a detective, you entered the residence, observed the scene, and then you suggested to the detectives what you might be able to do, correct?
Correct.
And so what was it that you determined that you thought would be the best utilization of your skills?
That I would look for any footwear or friction ridge evidence within the blood that was on the kitchen floor and on the floor of the living room.
So what, if anything, in terms of footprints, foot impressions, ridge detail on the floor, did could you see any, first of all, just visually?
In the living room, once I actually got down there with the flashlight, yes, I could see that there was some ridge detail, but I wanted to enhance it so that I could see it better. That was in the living room. And in the kitchen, I believe I saw some impressions using a flashlight and some just within the blood that I wanted to enhance.
How did you go about enhancing what you observed?
I did both physical and chemical processes. So I did black powder. Well, first of all, I photographed what I could see first. Then I tried black powder and I tried a chemical that reacts to blood.
Now, after you said you took photographs, would those photographs have been retained?
Yes, I personally did not take those photographs. The crime scene specialist took the photographs at my direction.
All righty. And then after utilizing the chemical processing, might that allow for a photograph to be taken to make it the image itself, the ridge detail, more apparent or obvious?
Yes.
And when we look at a photograph of an area of, let's say, the living room floor, and after the chemical processing, we have some images I'll show you, not right this moment, but they have a distinctive color. Why is that?
That is from the chemical that I used. For example, the ones in blood would be blue after I apply the chemical that I use for that. The ones that aren't in blood, you'll see it has a yellow hue because that dye stain is yellow. And when I use the alternate light source to visualize that, you'll see the image, the rich detail in yellow, like fluoresce.
You earlier this morning you explained um, the the glue process.
Yes.
So what was that term again?
Cyanacrylate.
Yeah. All righty. Can you spell that?
C.
It's okay if you
No,
can't. but-
CYANOCRALATE.
Thank you. I thought that might help the court reporter. That's why I asked. So did you do that within the home that day?
Not that day.
Okay. When did you do it, if you did?
The second day I responded.
All right. So how did you go about doing that?
For the area in the living room, because the area was so large, for instance, in the laboratory, when we typically do super glue fuming, we have a chamber that does that. So at a scene, which the floor was much larger, I had to create a portable tent. So what I did was I took traffic cones and I placed them around the area of the floor that I wanted to process. And I placed plastic across those cones to create a tent. And then I proceeded to do the super glue process, which involved, I had a portable heater, a hot plate, in which I applied super glue into a tin dish and placed that on the hot plate. And I heated that up within that sealed tent that I made. And I also put a humidifier in there because the super glue needs humidity in order for it to adhere to the surface. So I humidified the area, then put the glue in there to heat it up so that it would fume, and I let that fume for a while and then took it out, and then I had to then clear the house and for it to air out.
The chemical.
Yes, the chemical needed to air out.
And then were photographs taken of any ridge detail that you observed?
Yes.
Did you find, or did you observe, do you recall observing any apparent sock prints in the kitchen?
Yes.
Did they appear to be within the blood?
Yes.
And when you described them as apparent sock prints, what was it that you saw that made you believe that?
It was, I observed like an outline of a foot because I could clearly see like the outline of what appeared to be toes and then the rest of the foot. And there were linear lines, a linear pattern within that impression. And they were all parallel. The lines were parallel along from the what would be the heel to the toe, and they were just in rows, which friction ridge is not like that.
And when you were observing this, I mean, you mentioned there was blood on the floor, but were you able to determine if the sock print was there first or the blood was there first? Was that possible?
It appeared to me that the sock was there after the blood.
Did you also observe what you believed would be shoe prints on the tile floor in the kitchen?
Yes,
And did you process those and cause them to be photographed?
yes. Those were photographed and lifted with a gel lift.
Okay, explain that process for us.
So we did various processes. Like I said, I tried to powder it. I applied chemicals, and I also lifted the impression with a gel lift. A gel lift is merely similar. It's similar to a latent print card, like a paper.
Might that have been either Hans or Palma?
I would assume, yes.
When you processed what you observed and you saw potential ridge detail or a sock imprint, did you label them or cause them to be labeled in some fashion, and then a photograph taken?
Yes.
And what label would you have been using?
I used L for laboratory so that those could be differentiated from the evidence that the crime scene individuals were collecting. So we laid out little paper cards in the location of each imprint or ridge detailed area so that those could be photographed.
Okay, ma'am, I'm going to show you a few photographs that have previously been admitted into evidence. And the first one I'm going to show you is Exhibit 514. Can you explain to us what we are seeing here?
In this image, you can see the traffic cones that I described to you earlier, which assisted me in creating a tent. And there is the placard L5 displayed there. And you can also, in that image, you can see the hot plate that I was describing to you with the tin, with the super glue. You can see that the super glue has has changed color because it was heated.
So this object that I'm pointing to on
Yes.
a cone?
Yes.
And so this particular photograph, then it sounds like would have been taken after you had utilized the super glue.
Yes.
And in the chair back here, this plastic sheet, you know what that is?
It looks like plastic, but I don't recall if that was the plastic that I used. It could have been, but I don't recall.
All righty. In order to process this area, did you have to cause the couch to be moved?
Yes, so that we could get in there to move around and be able to build the tent.
Showing you Exhibit 306. Describe for the jury, please, what we're seeing here.
Those are areas of interest that we labeled that were going to be photographed. You can see all the little paper placards there with the cones again that I described were used to build the tent. Right here towards the front of the photograph is the forensic light source that was used after I applied the liquid chemical onto the surface after the super glue. And
What is this apparatus?
that is the forensic light source.
Okay.
And towards the top of the photograph, up against the chair, is broken down pizza boxes. Again, like I said, I was trying to do things that are typically in the laboratory out at a scene. So in order for me to visualize those prints with the forensic light source, I needed that area to be completely dark. And as you can see, that big window there, it was producing too much light. So I literally was trying to cover that area with the extended out pizza box to not allow the light in, and so that I could use that light source to look at what was produced after I superglued it and applied the chemicals.
Showing you Exhibit 307. This particular area of the, well, first of all, does this appear to be that living room floor?
Yes,
This surface is, one looks at it, might think it was wood, but was it wood?
no, it was the hard tile that's made to look like wood planks.
There's an area here in the middle of the photograph. I'm not sure how to describe the color, but it's clearly different than the other parts of the floor. What can you tell us about that?
That was the chemical that I spoke to you about previously. It's a yellow colored dye stain, which was applied and will adhere to the friction ridge that has been preserved with this super glue process.
Showing you Exhibit 304, which is in evidence. I see a placard that is L5A. What information does that provide us?
There's friction ridge detail in that print. You can see that it's the yellow is, the friction ridge detail is brighter than the yellow background.
Yeah. For those who aren't seeing what you're describing, trying to get it, it's hard to get it on the screen. So you see the ruler, it looks like.
Yes, and probably from the jury's vantage point, it just looks like linear ridges that's to the right of that scale.
Here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What did it appear to be at the time that you were looking at it?
It appeared at the scene, like I say, I don't try to particularly analyze it, but it was a larger area, so I assumed it had to be a palm or a foot.
And Exhibit 305. Now here, for the purpose of the record, I'll just say it looks yellow to me. The other 304 appeared to be orange or red. Why is there a difference in the colors?
It's just the lighting and the exposure that the crime scene person had their camera on. I know that they were taking a lot of pictures at different exposures so that they could actually capture the detail.
See the arrow in the ruler? Here.
Yes,
What's the purpose of that?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you see the date, however?
Yes,
Appears to be February 20th. Would you agree?
yes,
And then labeled as 5A.
yes.
And in this photograph 305, where were you seeing ridge detail?
To the, and the way I'm looking at it on the screen, to the left? To the left? of
Here?
The scale, yes.
Okay.
That arrow in the scale was probably a directional arrow. But I don't know what the crime scene people, what direction it was pointing. Usually it's north.
Showing you Exhibit 85, which is in evidence. What area of the home appears to be the focus of this image?
The kitchen. And you can see in the back of that, in the mirror, how we were dressed. You can see the reflection.
Here.
Yes.
All righty. And so that white appearing item is a Tyvek.
The Tyvek. Mm-hmm.
And we see an L1 and an L2. Would you agree?
Yes.
So I have Exhibit 86, which has a label a little difficult to see. Part of it's cut off. Appears to be L2. Would you agree?
Yes.
And above the yellow placard, are we seeing an impression?
Yes.
And at the scene, were you able to, did you develop any kind of impression from what you were seeing as to what, I used the word impression twice, but image you were seeing?
Yes.
And what was that?
We photographed it. It appeared to be a partial shoe print. With just this image, can I refer to my notes if it was a partial or a full impression?
Yes, ma'am. You could look. There's I believe the basis numbers for the 19th and 20th of February begins at 006230.
Okay, so my notes say that it was, appeared to be a right shoe with the diamond pattern in the heel and a hexagon triangle pattern in the toe. So for this image that you're showing, we were having difficulty capturing the entire shoe in one image. We had to light it various ways. So I'm assuming there's another photo out there that shows the rest of the shoe. But it may not have been captured all in the same photograph.
Now, directing your attention to Exhibit 85 again. On the floor, I see what appears to be a blue stain. What would that be?
That is the Kamasi blue chemical that I was referring to that reacts to the protein in blood.
In this image, can you see what appears to be some sort of pattern, wavy pattern leading to the hallway?
Yes,
And did you observe it that day?
yes.
Do you recall if we were to imagine a photograph which showed the hallway, this area of the living room, and then the Arcadia door off here to the right, did that pattern go all the way to the Arcadia door or into the kitchen?
Yes, I believe it started, I don't know exactly where it started, but it was from at the Arcadia door, kind of like in a wave pattern there, through the archway, and then down the hall.
Maybe this might help you. Showing you Exhibit 91. So we see, would you agree with me in this photograph, we see an L3 and an L4
Yes,
and a large mirror, correct?
yes,
Next to the Arcadia door. And this red appearing stain that I'm putting my finger around, this wavy pattern, what did that appear to be to you?
apparent blood.
And the chemical reactions that you've described, we see at L3 and L4. What did that reaction indicate to you?
That it was reacting with the protein in the blood. So those blue over there by in front of the mirror, there was blood there over there as well.
And showing you Exhibit 89, would you agree with me that this appears to be a close-up of that L4 image?
Yes.
And what, if anything, well, first of all, this particular chemical process was to determine if it was blood?
No, it wasn't to determine if it was blood. It was just that it reacts with protein in blood.
Okay. And what were you attempting to do with the chemical process?
I was attempting to enhance what I saw in the blood.
And
So you can see here, I only applied that chemical. You can see the line of the tile where the blue is up in the top corner. So down at the bottom corner of the image, I did not apply the chemical to those tiles.
within this blue stain, as we're looking at it here, inside the ruler, the
Yes.
L-shaped ruler, are we seeing any sort of ridge detail?
Not ridge detail, that's the detail where not friction ridge detail. There's ridge detail, but I believe the ridge detail appeared to be perhaps from fabric because it was so linear, like the fabric of a sock would be. And you can see what appears to be outlines of toes there.
Same question with, again, in Exhibit 91, we see an L3. Would you agree?
Yes.
Exhibit 87 appears to be a close-up of L3. Would you agree?
Yes.
What are we seeing here?
You can see what appears to be the shape of a foot with outline of toes within that apparent blood smear. And you can also see those linear ridge pattern that appear to go like from the toe area down towards the heel area.
I'd like to go through the L numbers. They appear to be, according to your report, L1 through L18. Would you agree?
Yes.
So if you could, and again, if you need to review your report, can you tell us what L1 appeared to be?
L1 was a shoe impression in the kitchen that had a diamond pattern on one end and a hexagon triangle type pattern on the other end. L2 also was a shoe impression, what we believe to be the right shoe with a diamond pattern in the heel and a hexagon triangle pattern in the toe.
And were these, did you do a gel lift for these?
Yes.
And were they assigned an item number?
Yes.
What was that number?
1020197.
L3, what did L3 appear to be?
That was what appeared to be a full left foot with the vertical linear pattern throughout it, in which I described it was an apparent sock print in the kitchen.
L5.
L5 was down in the sunken living room, and that was friction ridge detail.
L6, I did fail to ask you about that, but did you find some apparent hairs?
Yeah, while I was examining the floor, I did find some apparent hairs, so we collected that as well, and that was L6.
L7, 8, and 9. Was that friction ridge detail?
Yes, that was all friction ridge detail down in the sunken living room.
L10, was that a partial shoe impression?
Yes, it was a partial shoe impression with the lug pattern.
11, 12, and 13, were those?
Those were similar to the sock print that I observed and developed in the kitchen in the blood, and those sock prints appeared also to be in blood.
L14.
Was a partial shoe print with a diamond pattern.
L15 and L16.
That was more what appeared to be sock prints in blood.
L17 and 18.
Those were friction ridge detail.
I want to take you now to March 5th of 2015. At least a report dated March 5th, 2015. Did you have occasion while in the laboratory to examine the piece of a broken bottle?
Yes,
And were you examining it for the presence of potential latent prints?
yes.
I have a photograph I will show you a little later, but what do you remember? Well, first of all, would you have, when you examine an item like this in the laboratory, you take notes of the item describing what it is you're going to examine?
Yes.
And so when you received this item, describe what it was that you received.
May I refer to my notes?
Yes, ma'am. This would be the report. The Bates stamp numbers begin at 006185.
Okay, my notes state that I received a broken bottleneck that was packaged in a cardboard box. And the cardboard box was contained the bottleneck in a glass jar filled with Kim wipes, so you have a jar. There were the broken bottleneck was wrapped in Kim wipes. Kim wipes are almost like tissue, except a different, it's similar material, but not quite like tissue that laboratories use to wipe down lenses or glass for cleaning. So that bottleneck was placed in the Kim wipes in the jar, assuming so that it wouldn't break. And then that jar was put into a cardboard box with peanuts, the packing peanuts. And that's what I received.
And what, if any, kind of analysis did you do with this broken bottle?
So I processed that item. I was attempting to determine if there was any friction ridge detail on there. So the first thing I do is I do a visual examination. During my visual examination, I did not see any ridge detail. Therefore, I continued with the super glue process that I described to you earlier. Of course, but this is now in the laboratory in a more proper environment for the super gluing, and I placed that into the super glue chamber and fumed that item. I then looked at to see if anything was developed from after the super glue process. I still did not see any friction ridge detail. So then I applied the liquid fluorescent dye, that the same one that I used at the scene, called MBD, which fluoresces yellow. So then I looked at that under an alternate light source, which is also the forensic light source that I showed in the photograph earlier. And I still did not see any ridge detail.
Now, while conducting your analysis, did you have in mind the potential that this item might be processed later for DNA?
Yes, and anytime I believe that an item is going to need to be processed for DNA, I always use clean techniques, which means I'm wearing gloves, I'm wearing a mask, I'm cleaning everything prior to and in between each step. I'm cleaning my gloves, changing my gloves, cleaning the utensils that I use, et cetera, et cetera.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes.
And now I want to take you to October 5th of 20. Actually, September 20th of 2016 is the report. But on March the 19th of 2015, did you at the laboratory, did you obtain print exemplars for Alex? And I'm going to mispronounce his name. I'm going to spell his last name, Sukhodolov.
Yes.
And did you get finger, palm, and foot exemplars?
Yes, I did.
And the term exemplar, I guess, is probably obvious, but I mean, what is an exemplar?
It's merely the capturing of the friction ridge detail on the hands and the feet, the palmar surface of the hands and the soles of the feet.
I want to take you to a report dated, I believe, September 29th of 2016. And let me ask you to look at 006163, the Bates numbers, please.
Can you say the number again, please?
Sure, 006163.
Okay.
So were you recording your examination of a closet door that had been impounded?
Yes.
And can you tell me because I'm a little confused by the dates, but what date would this have been done?
I began processing this item on February 24th, 2015.
Okay. And describe, Your Honor, it's 5 minutes to 12. It's going to take me a few minutes with this. You want to go ahead and take the break?
If this is a good time to take a break, we'll go ahead and break for lunch at this time. Please remember that admonition, and we'll see you back here at 1:30. Thank you.